So let's talk now about the absolute necessity for you to have the discipline and the patience to do your bore scope evaluation through the oil sump. Again, if I had to choose one of these methods of bore scope evaluation, be it going through the spark plug holes, through the cylinder head and coming in from this angle, or coming in from the sump, I would choose the sump in 100% of the cases. Let's talk about why that is. Well, because it's going to take me longer to remove the spark plugs and coil packs from the engine, especially in a 996 or a 997, where you're fighting cylinder 4 and you're fighting cylinder 1 to get to the spark plugs. It's going to take you longer to do that than it is to pull 13 fasteners on your sump plate and remove the sump plate. It's also going to give you a bird's eye view into the heart of your engine. So when you pull that sump plate off, you are going to instantly see a big symptom of bore scoring that you can't see any other way. So as I follow threads on social media and forums, especially Rennlist, there's been a lot of confusion about how I access cylinder number 6, specifically cylinder number 6, because it is one that usually has bore scoring. Not to say that any other cylinder can have bore scoring, because any cylinder can. You can't really look at it that way. In this particular case, we have scoring on cylinders 5 and cylinder 6, okay? A lot of times you'll have that, or sometimes you'll have it on just 5 or just 6 or just 4. Sometimes you'll have it on every cylinder, some worse than others. So later on in this particular video that we shot back in 2019, you'll see that we start on bank 2 and we do our evaluation through the spark plug hole and through the sump, looking over here first. The reason for that is because it is mostly prominent here. You can usually down an engine very quickly doing the sump inspection, especially if you just move cylinder number 6 piston up to top dead center, okay, and then access through the sump up into cylinder number 6. I want to show you a loose pathway to do that here in just a few minutes, because that's a question we get a lot. Up into number 6 and look at the top and bottom of that particular cylinder using either of these two types of scopes. Of course, that's where having a little mirror on here is going to come in handy, okay, because it's going to show you the top or bottom easier. You can still do it without that, okay? You also might want to introduce some ambient light up through the sump to help illuminate that bore, so you don't have to have the camera right on it to illuminate the problematic area, okay? So since we're just revising this video and adding a little bit of stuff for 2021, I'm going to give you a very crude breakdown of the direction that I follow when I do the sump inspection, okay? And this is, you're going to have to get a little creative. The bore scope you have means a lot. This one only has a 3.5 millimeter tip on it, which is very, very critical to this. If you look at that compared to this professional one, it's like 8 millimeters. It is a tremendous difference, okay? Now, for what this one gains in size, it makes up for features because it has the 90-degree camera. So even though you're picking up some size, you have the ability to go 90 degrees. I would actually give up the ability to go 90 degrees to have this very small size. 3.5 millimeter, 4 millimeter at most is the biggest I would want for this. And the size of this tip means everything. Also, the flexibility of the end of this is important. Some of these can only flex like 4 inches past the camera. This one only has maybe 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches of rigid area before you start to get to your first flexible point. That's another key, okay? Try to pull the sump plate off the night before you're going to do this and let everything drain out, okay? So we bring our camera up into this area. Now this is always open. This area here is open, and there is a windage scraper or a crankshaft scraper on the bottom of the crankshaft that's black, and that helps to direct oil back into the sump that's coming off the crankshaft. Okay, you're going to have that to fight with. You also have the crankshaft carrier that actually holds the crankshaft in place, and it has a few saddles in there that are in your way. We don't have that here. We can't show it. I'm just trying to give you an example of when you watch later on in this earlier video from 2019 what you're looking at. So you come up in, And if I'm trying to get to cylinder 6, which is back here, so we are laid out as cylinder 6, cylinder 5, cylinder 4, okay? So this would be the front of the car in the 911 variant, okay? So what I do, if I'm trying to get into cylinder 6, I'm going to fight a little bit. I'm going to bend this a little bit, kind of like that. I'm going to come in and I'm going to start fishing it up through that crankshaft carrier. I'm going to work around the side of the carrier and the connecting rod here. It's on cylinder 5. I'm going to come up and I'm going to try to get this camera about right here in cylinder 6. And then you can take a flashlight and bring in some more ambient light kind of down this angle, right? So if you bring a flashlight in and get some light up in that cylinder, it's going to help you a lot, okay? Because ambient light is a key. If you've got another small little pin light or something that you could get up in there, that's going to help you as well, because then you don't have to get your camera really any further than about where I'm at right now to see this, because your piston is at top dead center. It's up the bore. And then you would clearly be able to look through your camera and see that you've got bore scoring. This is so bad you can hear it. Okay? Yours may not be that bad. Okay? If it's that bad, you're beyond the point where you even need a bore scope to make sure you've got scoring. It's going to be very evident with all the other symptoms. But at this point, you can do that. Now, this engine is an M9603, so it has a pass-through point here, and that pass-through point allows the piston pins to be put in along with their clips passing through the crankcase. Now, if it was a little bit later M9603, it would have a windage notch here on each side, and that would be all cut out. You wouldn't have this hole here, okay? You would have a big windage notch. Those are easier to deal with because about a ½ inch deep, this whole entire portion of the cylinder is removed. So you can go anywhere up inside here and get to your cylinder. Those are the easiest ones. But if yours has holes like this, you want to sneak up in. Now, if you're like that, that's fine. You can also manage it to kind of get it up into cylinder 5's pass-through point and work it into cylinder 6 and do this. That's harder to do because you've got to go up into that bore. This piston's trying to come down and things like that. But that's another angle you can get to. All this comes through the same access point with a good degree of patience, okay? You're going to have that. Again, bring in ambient light. If you've got a small pin light, or even if you had a second bore scope that had a light on the end of it, you can use one to provide light, and you can use one to provide the camera view. So that's another good way of being able to get up in here. Now, cylinder 5 is easy. When you go to do cylinder 5, you can just kind of come up and pretty much go straight in. You know, seeing the bottom portion, this side of cylinder 5 is not as easy. Seeing the top portion of cylinder 5 is very easy. Cylinder number 4 is not that hard either. You kind of have to do the same thing you did on 6. It's not as difficult, and you have to kind of come up here and go into it. Now, the reason why it's not as difficult is because where this notch is further towards cylinder 4 than it is cylinder 6. So cylinder 4 is the easiest one you're going to do, okay? So now I want to show you another little trick about another way you can do this before we go any further. But again, sometimes you have to access the cylinder that you want to see via the cylinder that's adjacent to it. That is the key that not a lot of people are figuring out. I just wanted to show you what I was talking about a little bit more in depth with the windage cutouts that are in the bottom of some of the cylinders in some particular applications. Now, Porsche went to these windage notches, then they went back away from it. There's a whole lot of back and forth. We'd have to put a big list out there of each engine designation that has it or doesn't have it. This is an early M9603, so it doesn't have it. Some of the later M9603s did have it. This one is extremely early not to have it. Most of them do. So in this case, you see here that we've got just an access port. This is the block that I just showed you guys, and I'm showing kind of that access port that I was able to bring the camera up through while we were filming that crude pathway to get into cylinder number 6. Over here, this block is an M9721. This would be a Cayman S, okay? And as you can see, this one has Caymanitis. See how the bottom of this blew out? That's because Caymans lose connecting rods really bad. and connecting rod bolts, and the connecting rod becomes a bit of a hatchet and it breaks through the block. So that's what you're seeing here. At the end of the day, this notch that you're looking at, this big relief here, makes it a lot easier on the engines that have this, like this M9721, to sneak up into cylinder 6, because you've got a big elongated area here, if you will, that will allow you to sneak that bore scope up into number 6, okay? So this is a block that has the longer and larger windage notches. This one is not windage relieved at all. It just has the pass-through ports to get the piston pin tool through to load the piston pin and the clip during engine assembly. That's what that's for.